Excellent. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today as the last on the cards for the Sunshine Coast Women's Lifestyle Expo. So today I'm going to be talking about the step-by-step process of becoming an author. Now, as a non-fiction ghostwriter, people approach me at all different stages of their process. From those who have an idea and like the idea of becoming an author but have no idea where to start, all the way through to those who have done all of the legwork and created their own manuscript, and they're now coming to me to help them with the publishing process. So one of the main things I have found the difference between those who achieve and those who sit on the fence and think about it is that there is a lot of overwhelm and uncertainty around what it takes to become an author. So I'm hoping my session with you today will help to clear a lot of that up and get you really clear and confident and able to take the progress that you need to achieve your dream if you have been one of the many who have been thinking about becoming an author. So I am going to walk you through the process, but first of all I'm going to let you know a bit about myself. So I am a bookworm from way back, the very definition of a bookworm. So I was that girl who was always under the covers with the torch, in bed when I should have been sleeping, every night. And you know, everything from the fantasy novels I read growing up through to the autobiographies I now enjoy. You know, who doesn't love a good celeb autobiography, a tell-all? I've always been one of those people that gets really lost in a story and finds it really hard to put down a good book when you've got that connection. So my first job was actually as a newspaper delivery girl. So back in New Zealand, probably in my late primary years, I was one of the kids that was out and about with a yellow, really stylish yellow PVC satchel bag, delivering about 20 newspapers every afternoon. So that was my first gig. But what it did was it gave me a real taste for newspapers. So, you know, that the smell of the newsprint, getting to read the headlines and knowing what was going on in the world around me was really quite amazing, and I got into that quite heavily as a youngster. When my family moved to Australia, my priorities changed a little bit, and I decided that I was going to gun for the Air Force. Now, completely left of field, and something that, you know, I guess it kind of landed for me one day. That was what I was going to do. So I put all of my energy into that. I was running every day, I was doing the push-ups and the sit-ups, which I can't do now, and also getting the grades together, like trying to tick all of the boxes to make it in. So what happened for me was the crunch time came, and I was told, as I was an asthmatic, I had to pass an extra medical examination to be able to be accepted. Now, you know, 16, 17, I've pitched everything into this opportunity, and this is where I wanted my life to go. So I was filled with really nervousness going into this examination, and the specialists were there. I'm getting jittery even thinking about it. You know, you can probably sense that in my body language. This was how real it was for me. Essentially, within the first 30 seconds, I could feel my body responding in an asthmatic way. My windpipe was tightening up, I could feel the wheeze coming on, and of course the specialists had to fail me for that test. So essentially I felt the proverbial rug being pulled out from underneath me and had to see my best friend, and he was my ex-boyfriend now, but my boyfriend at the time, get accepted and move into the Air Force while I was kind of in this limbo land, wondering what I'm going to do with myself. So I guess it gave me a beautiful opportunity to reflect on what I loved, and I was obviously, my personality type, I've always been an observer, a listener, always a bit of a nosy Parker, asking people why they were doing things that they were doing, just to get the full picture. And you know, it's interesting to see how that three-letter word why has become so integral to what I do now. It is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself and that you can ask others. So interesting that I landed on that at such a young age. So the world of journalism called. So I spent 13 years as a community journalist, regional journalist, and also wrote for newspapers, magazines, e-zines, websites. I ran the whole gamut, and also freelanced for a few years as well. But I guess it took an outsider's perspective for me to land on ghostwriting as a profession. It's not something that you come across every day, and I love that I always get a raised eyebrow whenever I mention that that's what I do for a living. But what it essentially does for me is it allows me to really get to know the people that I'm working with. I'm spending months on end with these incredible people who have such a passionate why and such a desire to make change in the world, and to, I guess, use my skill set to be able to empower them to step up and become the change makers that they want to be. It lights me up every time. So that's essentially my story of why I've got to where I am. And it might seem a bit self-indulgent that I've spent this long telling you this, but there is a purpose behind it. So I could have sat here and gone, hi, I'm Roxy, I'm a non-fiction ghostwriter. I've been doing this for several years, and I have an amazing lot of titles behind me, and I'm going to share my expertise with you now. I could have done that. Instead, I shared a bit about my story and gave you some insight into my journey to where I am right now. And the reason I've done that is to show you the power of connection. So for me, as a ghostwriter who's taking on other people's stories, connection is the most important ingredient, and I am going to share a bit more about that with you as we proceed. So, the very first step of writing a book is to actually write it. So, I have done 2-hour presentations on how to write a book, so obviously we can't cover all of the intricacies of that here, but I will give you a few little tidbits that you can take with you to start, I guess, getting those creative juices flowing and to start getting you thinking about what your book could potentially be. So, remember those 3 little words that I mentioned just earlier? So the why. Finding your why is so important when it comes to becoming an author. And the reason for that is that this is going to be one of the most important things that will propel you forward and keep you motivated and make sure that you see it through to the end. So, and it is a hard question to answer sometimes. So I want to get you, if you are on an path of authorship, maybe you've started, maybe you're still sitting on the fence about it, to really think about why you want to become an author. I mean, it sounds like a fabulous idea. Everyone wants to be an author, but why? So is it because you want to entertain people? Are you wanting to create a fantasy novel that will just help people with some escapism and some entertainment? Are you wanting to inform people, to share some knowledge that you've learned or experienced so that they can avoid making the same mistakes, or maybe even elevate their life to another level? Are you wanting it to become a bestseller? Is that your end goal, to be the top of the top and to really make an impact in the world? Or are you wanting to use it as a pillar for your business, to leverage off, opening up those gates to speaking experiences, really taking your profile to the next level and opening up doors that you haven't been able to bust through just yet? Or is it simply about leaving a legacy for your loved ones? Is it about documenting your life story so that they can, future generations can have an understanding of the life that you've lived? There's so many different whys, and there's no right or wrong. It's about what it means to you and what is going to really light you up as you go through the process. So now that we've solidified your why, take some time. You don't have to do it on the spot right now. But once you've solidified your why, you then need to look at who your audience is. And this is another important step to enact as you are writing, or before you even begin to write, is to look at who it is that you're wanting to connect with. So there are many people that fall into the trap of saying my book is for everyone. So it is something, it's lovely to think that everyone could pick up a book and get what they need from it. But the danger for an author who comes at their project from that angle is that you run the risk of not getting anyone, because not everyone is going to connect with the message if you don't have a particular reader in mind. So when you look at connection, first of all, we've connected you to your why and to your purpose for the book. Now we need to connect your message with your readers. So when you think about the books who have made an impact on your life, you'll find that they all have one thing in common. They may be across a variety of genres, they may be fiction, non-fiction, it doesn't matter. They've all got this one thing in common, and that's connection. So you're either connected to the author, you're connected to the way that the message has been delivered, or you're connected to the message itself. And when you can master all three of those, that's when you're on the way to bestseller status. So it's very important. So when looking at who your ideal reader is, I will give you a journalistic analogy because that's just my jam, that's what I know. But it's about looking at them from a few different perspectives. So the who, what, when, and where. So we want to know who your ideal reader is. Like I said, we don't want it to be everyone, we want it to be someone. It may be breast cancer patients, it may be fly in, fly out workers, it may be people who are having financial struggles, it could be anyone, but it's about defining who they are so that you can communicate directly to them. You will of course grab other people in by default, that's how it works, and they'll be drawn to you for other reasons and to your book for other reasons. So yeah, nailing out who it is very important. Then we move to what. What can you teach them? What are the main lived experiences that you've had? What are the amazing golden nuggets that you've been able to uncover as you've been studying or learning or just going through life? It's about really nutting out what those things are. The next step is how. So how do you know this? How did you come to learn your what, essentially? Was it book smarts? Was it years of research and study? Was it literally being out on the streets? Was it receiving that diagnosis? Really honing into the how you came to be the possessor of this amazing information. So the when is all about at what stage you want to connect with your reader. When we're looking at a hero's journey or trying to educate people, you need to look at whether you're wanting to reach them before a particular event, when they're in the midst of a particular event, or after they've overcome it and need to move, what's the next step? They're looking for that next step and how to make their lives better, for example. And then the where. I love this one particularly. And that's about where do you want their mind to arrive at by the time they finish your last page of your book. So what is the clear message that you're wanting to share with them? Because once you've locked that in, you can weave this through all of your manuscript and make sure that all of the material that you pull in, that you decide to share, is relevant and will strengthen that. So you can always have a bit of fun playing around with that. And yeah, usually I would say it's about something that would really light you up. If someone comes back to you and says, look, I've read your book and it changed my life because it taught me X, then their X is definitely your where. And of course your why. We've already covered the why, so we won't have to go back there again. So there are, when you're looking at writing a book, there are so many different ways that you can present your information. Now, because I am an expert in non-fiction over fiction, I'll focus on non-fiction for today. So there is the how-to, the step-by-step process book, where you're looking at things like, your cookbooks, or you're teaching a practical skill or something that people can do by following a process. There's also, obviously, what comes to top of mind for most people is the autobiography or memoir. Now, I get asked what the difference between those two is all the time. So an autobiography essentially is someone's life story from the moment that they're born to the moment that the book is written. Now, an offshoot of that is a biography, which is written about someone's life, but it's written by someone else. And then a memoir is all about a particular moment in time. So, for example, if we're looking at the breast cancer journey, someone would be sharing all of the events that were linked to and around that. Or they might be sharing the events. So if we look at Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, she wrote only about the 3 years that she travelled and learnt a lot all about herself in her personal development journey. So that's where the difference comes into play. So what I love and what I have had the great honour of being able to do a lot of is a combination of both of those. So it's a process as well as a memoir. Now, as a ghostwriter, I do sign non-disclosure agreements, which do hamstring me a lot about sharing the work that I've done before and who I've been able to work with. But the lovely Stu Darling, who's based in New Zealand, is one of the few who has publicly disclosed that I have ghostwritten a book with him. And so we were able to produce Lead Through Life. And this is a perfect example of weaving memoir in with a process. So to give you a bit of background, Stu spent 2 decades in the British military, covert operations, being deployed in Afghanistan and the Middle East a few times, and worked his way up the ranks to being one of the major ranking officers who was overseeing the school who teaches new soldiers. So he was able to see leadership at all those different levels, as well as navigating leadership in a family where he lost his father at quite a young age. So we were able to weave all of that experience, all of those amazing anecdotes in with his framework that he's developed. And his whole business is now Lead Through Life, and he's doing incredible things in New Zealand and being interviewed as an expert in his field and all sorts of stuff. So it's really incredible to see what can happen when you marry those two things together. So if you're looking for something that has a little bit more structure in your book, you can come at it from a listicle point of view. Not many people know listicle. I don't know if that's a name that I made up, but essentially it's things like, your top 10 tips for going on holiday with children, or 101 dad hacks, or anything that basically has a number in it, because it gives you the structure to then go through each of them and expand. So that can be a nice, easy way to get something together. And there's also, for those who are very averse to writing at all, you can look at something like a coffee table book. Now, for people that have niche markets or very highly visual markets, this can be a really great way to showcase your work and obviously the case studies of people that you have worked with in a really beautiful way that will connect on a highly visual way where the words don't matter as much. So yeah, but the hot thing for 2020 is the collaboration book. So it's definitely the flavour of the year. Now essentially what this is where you're bringing many voices into one book. So one example, again, I can share because she's gone public, is Kerry Atherton's Stories of Hope. Now this is a collection of 12 stories where each of the authors has contributed their own chapter. So what's great about this from an authorship perspective is that obviously your workload is greatly reduced. Everyone's contributing their own chapter. All of the contributors are feeling amazing because they only have to write between 3,000 and 5,000 words, as opposed to something like this where you're looking at about 60,000 to 70,000 words. So it's a lot less daunting. Also, with collaborative books, what you have is the power of the collective. So all of these people are coming together with a common theme, and they're also very passionate advocates for the book as well. So we now have essentially 12 authors who are going out, taking this out to the world and spreading it far and wide, so creating that beautiful ripple effect because they're all connected to the book and the message that it's trying to share. So that can be another way, particularly if you are someone who has a podcast or someone who interacts with people on a regular basis through your profession, to get these collaborative books happening. And yeah, can really, it's the done thing at the moment, let me tell you, they're popping up everywhere. So that essentially, the only other thing I can say about writing is really it's about consistency. So you probably hear that word a lot, but it is about making your book a priority, carving out some time in an already hectic schedule that's just for this, and this is where your why comes into it. Really connecting to that why and remembering the purpose of investing your time at this time. Of course, if you are completely averse to writing at all, there are ghostwriters like myself who can step in and help you with that part of the journey as well. So step 2 is editing. Now, this is such an important part of book production, and it's something I believe should never be undervalued. So I know there have been many times where I've been deeply enthralled and engaged in a particular book, and then I've come across a spelling error, or perhaps there's a misplaced word, or they've completely missed a word, and it just jars you right out from that flow, and you're like, oh. And it may happen more to me because, of my industry, I'm maybe a bit more sensitive to it. But having that multiple times throughout your book is not a good look, particularly if you're wanting to use your book for your business, to establish yourself as a credible expert. You want to be minimizing that as much as possible. So even in the world of journalism, and we did, I don't know what it's like these days, but back in my days, we had the journalists and we had the editors. And the rule of thumb was you never edit your own work. And I believe this is absolutely crucial when it comes to writing as well. There can be the temptation for you to think you can save a few bucks by just editing it yourself. But there is a tendency for your brain to almost switch on its own autocorrect. So your brain already knows you've spent probably months on this manuscript. You know exactly what you're wanting to say and where your sentences and paragraphs should be leading. And if there are some mistakes, that autocorrect kicks in and you will skip it, you'll miss it, essentially because your brain already knows what's meant to be there. The power of having an editor step in is that they have fresh eyes. They don't know essentially where your book is going. They don't have that anticipation of what the next word should be. They're coming at it from a completely clear space, and they, for that reason, will pick up every single little mistake that you've made, which can be frustrating at the time, but it is absolutely essential to really cleaning up that manuscript and making it the best it can possibly be. So just to give you an idea of what that would look like with authors that I work with, particularly in the independent publishing, which we'll come to later, I'll fill in that blank for you. We have a 3-stage editing process for that very reason. So the first pass is very much about looking at the structure and the flow of the manuscript, making sure that we're introducing ideas as they come and not skipping things and just really cleaning it up in that way. The second pass is really going in with a microscope and looking at the spelling and the grammar and all those things that can really drive you crazy as a reader, and clearing those up. Now the third pass is usually done after formatting, and that's where, again, it's a read-through that just picks up all those little things that may have slipped through the cracks. Now, even in these 3 stages, I don't use the same editor for that reason, because they will get that anticipation going on. They know what's coming next. So every stage has a fresh set of eyes, and that's just to maximise the efficiency of it all. So it just shows how important it is to step away, and I know that can be a challenge for authors. These are our babies, these are our literary babies, but to have the bravery to step away and let other professional come in and do their thing, because that's what they do best. So once the editing is completed, the third step is formatting. So this is essentially where your Word document, we all know the Word documents, the giant pages, turn into what would look like a book page, which is very exciting. So it's where the designers take all of your photos, your diagrams, your images, play around with the fonts that you think look funky, all that sort of stuff, and bring it all together to create pages that are the size of what your final book will be. That's essentially that step in a nutshell. And the 4th step is cover design. Now that it can be a lot of fun as well. So I enjoy this part immensely, particularly because for the authors, quite often this is the stage where they feel it's actually real. Like the first time they see their cover design, they see their name at the bottom, they see the image they've picked, it really hits home for them, and you can just feel that buzz of excitement that comes from that. Now I have a team who deal with the cover design and creation. There's a reason for that, and that's that I'm not an expert in that by any means. I'm definitely a wordsmith and not a designer. So for the same reason, I would suggest even those who are self-publishing, they're taking on the journey by themselves, it is so important to engage a professional who knows what they're doing for cover design. There is the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, and that may work very well in when you're looking at societal expectations and all that sort of stuff and giving people the benefit of the doubt. But literally when it comes to selling books, every buyer judges a book by its cover. So it's very much the opposite. And if you don't get the cover right, it can be the difference between someone picking it up and buying it and sharing it with their friends and creating that ripple effect. And it can even be the make or break between whether or not a bookstore will take your book on or a distributor will take your book on. The reason for that is that there are trade standards that do need to be met, and if you're dealing with someone who's not familiar with those trade standards, you could end up with a bit of a problem on your hands when it comes time to actually market your book. So taking that into consideration is very important when looking at your cover design. Excellent. So the fifth step, step 5, is the ISBN. So that stands for International Standard Book Number. It's really a fancy word for barcode. So this is what it is. This is generally a process if you are independently or traditionally published. It happens behind the scenes. You don't have a lot to do with that. If you are self-publishing, you will be responsible for getting this. So it is something that every book needs. Obviously, as a barcode, it's a unique identifier that marries your book with your title, and it goes into the library systems and all that sort of stuff. So one important thing to note as well is that every publishing house and every independent publisher does have a few unique numbers that make up this barcode that identify it as not being self-published. So it can be a bit of a giveaway if you're wanting to self-publish and wanting to get distributed. You will find that the distributors will, value a book that's been produced through a process rather than one that you've taken on yourself. So it's just something to bear in mind. Again, it's not a barrier all the time, but just something to take into consideration. So step 6 is publishing. So that's the biggest, we'll talk a fair bit about this because I find publishing comes up in conversation with everyone that I speak to, no matter what stage of the journey they're at. Even people who are just going, oh yeah, being an author would be great. They're already thinking about publishing. So there are 3 main streams of publishing. So I mentioned them all already, but I'll go over them in detail now. So there's traditional. So that's where you're looking at, the Pan Macmillans, the Penguins, the Allen and Unwins, all the big guys. There's self-publishing, where you essentially take on every element of publishing yourself. And then there's independent publishing, which is the middle of the road. So they have very specific processes that you follow, but again, you retain all of the control throughout that. So I'll run through each of those individually, because with everything in life there's pros and cons. So we'll discuss a little bit of those there just to give you an overview of things to think about. Traditional seems to still be the end game for a lot of people that I speak to. So there's still that real allure of being, a traditionally published author and having that banner and that backing. So if we look at the pros of that, obviously they are a business, they produce books, they have a marketing budget, they have budgets for lots of things. So one of those things is that they will often give you an advance payment. So this is essentially buying your manuscript from you. They also cover the costs of producing your book, so you don't have any of those outlays. It's all taken care of. You've done the hard yards of the manuscript writing, and then you can kind of sit back for a bit while all of this happens. They also have a really great distribution network, so they can get your books pretty much anywhere. That's the power that they have behind the businesses that they've built up. So there are also smaller publishers too that are popping up, and some that have been working in the background for a number of years, who have a really great niche market, and they're also a lot more approachable than the big guys too. So you can also consider that when looking at where you'd like to go. Some of the cons of being traditionally published, as I mentioned before, they have the budgets, they buy the book from you. So the challenge in that is that you're essentially selling your manuscript. So they now own the rights. They can edit it however they would like to, and they can sell it and put it on the market whenever they would like to. So, for example, if you've written a particular genre that's not popular in the sales rankings at the time, they might choose to bank your book for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and bring it to market when they feel that it's going to make the biggest return on investment for them. So that can sound harsh, but essentially, a publisher is a business, and that's their business. They've invested in you by buying your manuscript, and they want to get the biggest return on investment. That's just good business practice. One of the other challenges with getting into traditional publishing is cutting through the noise. Now, we see some publishers are still accepting manuscript submissions just from the general public, which is great. The only problem you have there is that you are competing against hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are also gunning for that position and to get a mark on the register. So it's about being able to cut through the noise. Now, you can engage the services of a literary agent who can help you to open some doors, but that again is a bit of a cost for their time and their expertise. So when we look at money still, sorry that the money is the main focus of this one, your royalties when you're traditionally published are really not that crash hot. So when you're looking at what they're doing for you, they've produced the book, they've given you the reach, they've given you the volume, but they are a business and they're trying to recoup their investment. So often, if you are a first timer, just making your mark, you will see probably about $1 from the sale of every book that they sell for you. Obviously, that can change the more that you build your profile. I'm sure, international bestsellers like Stephen King get a lot more than $1 a book, but that comes with time and obviously with building your profile as well. So yes, the other thing too, and one of the biggest misconceptions I do come across is people think all of the marketing will be taken care of if they're going through a traditional publisher. Now, while they do have a marketing budget, again, this will be allocated depending on your profile and what sort of potential they see for you to make sales. So some authors might be lucky enough to get, national book tours and TV appearances and all that sort of stuff. Others are literally given the bare bones, and it's still up to them to build the profile around their book and to make those sales happen. So it can be a bit of a mixed bag. So I would say read the contract. So excellent. So if we go to the other end where it's self-publishing, one of the things I love about this realm is that it's no longer viewed as vanity publishing. So it did have that stigma for a lot of years because people thought, oh, if you're self-publishing, you're not that great because the publishers aren't picking you up. Now that's completely gone now. It's now seen as a bit more of an empowerment tool because you're seizing the opportunity to release what you want when you want to and not worrying about what anyone else has to say, essentially, or relying on anyone else for that matter. So it can, it's definitely emerged from the shadows and is becoming more and more common, which is amazing to see. Now, the pros of self-publishing mainly are that you retain control over everything. So the rights are 100% yours, you have control over every step of the process, and you have the ability to release the book whenever you like. So if you want to put it out into the world as soon as it's hot off the press, you can totally do that. So the control's definitely in your court. Now, one of the other major pros is that the return on investment is really great. So for every book that you sell, you get 100% of the cover price back. So when we look at comparing that to a traditional publisher, say we have a book that has a cover charge of $24.99, the publisher sells 10 books, you get $10. If you are then self-publishing and you sell 10 books, you get $249.90. So what some people do see as a bit of a con, however, is that you need to pay for the production of your book up front. So as you engage your editors, they need to be paid, the formatters need to be paid, the designers need to be paid. So it is that initial investment up front, but of course with such great returns, the chance to get your return on investment back and then profit afterwards is a lot higher. So yes, but again, when it comes to marketing, it all rests on your shoulders as well. So some people can see that as a pro or a con, depending on your personality type, I guess. So yes, so we've got the traditional and the self. Now in the middle we have indie publishing. Now this is my favourite because it is the middle of the road, but it incorporates the best of both worlds. So what you obviously get from indie publishing, you are still retaining all of your rights and control of the process. But what's different here is that you are not having to seek out the services of experts in every one of the book production fields. You have a team behind you who can do everything. So it's kind of like you've got a process, you start at the process, you work your way through and you come out the end with a beautiful book. So it's a lot less stressful. And of course you have a publishing team behind you who know the trade standards. They know what's required to make your book sellable. They know what an amazing book cover design will look like and who will pick up what from the shelf. So you've got all of that expertise behind you as well, while still retaining the control and the ability to do basically whatever you want with your book. So it's a beautiful, beautiful middle of the road, I think. Obviously the cons for some, it does still require that upfront investment, but I believe the trade-off is that quality and also the ability to access distribution networks as well. So you can tap into, indie publishers often have their own publishing distribution networks to get your book out, online, through audiobooks, through ebooks, and also into libraries and independent bookstores as well. So the potential there is a lot greater, with a little less stress along the way, which is always great. So interestingly, this is the stream where most of my clients end up going. They like that beautiful middle of the roadway. I do have an interview series called The Phoenix Phenomenon, where for the last 2 seasons I have focused solely on authors and talking about the transformative process they've gone through with becoming authors, and what they've learned about themselves and how it's helped their business, all of that amazing stuff. And I have been fortunate enough to talk to a couple of really high profile international bestsellers. Now these people are obviously legends in their game, but they have also run the gamut of self, indie and traditional publishing. So they've been able to experience all 3 streams. And I do ask them, which do you prefer? And without hesitation, every one of them says indie publishing. So it's just an interesting thing to share, and you're welcome to check out any of my past episodes on my website if that's something that you'd be interested in hearing from the horse's mouth and not just taking my word for it. So yeah, so that's an interesting thing to consider. One other thing I do want to stipulate for you all as well is that choosing to self or independently publish does not exclude you from being traditionally published in the future. So essentially it can work a lot in your favour, and I've seen a few times where authors have chosen to independently publish. They've gone on to sell thousands of copies, they've won book awards, they've done amazing things, and then all of a sudden the publishers that they were trying to attract beforehand are knocking on their doors going, hey, we really like what you're doing, how about you come with us? So the beauty with that is that obviously you're no longer on your hands and knees to them going, please, please give me a chance. They've seen what you're capable of and they want you. So the power is now totally in your court, and the negotiations can take a much better, I guess, direction in your favour. So yeah, so I just wanted to clear that up as well, because people think once you choose one, you can't ever cross over, but there definitely is potential for you to do that. So excellent. So I hope that's cleared up a bit. Oh wow, about publishing. So the final step is marketing. Now it is often the forgotten component of authorship, because I know a lot of authors are quite introverted. They don't like the idea of putting themselves out there. However, at the end of the day, people are buying you and they're buying your message. And you need to be prepared to step up and get yourself out there as much as you can to build those connections with your ideal readers and get those book sales happening. So it is definitely something very important to consider. And there are ways, and I do have a team that can help with this, to create pre-sale strategies. So if you're worried about the initial outlay of producing your book, you can instill a pre-sale strategy that can really help to get that return on investment happening before the physical books have even landed at your front door. So there's definitely ways around it. It's just about, getting connected to your why, getting passionate, and then you're going to want to jump on the roof and scream from the rooftop how amazing your book is. So that's the key element there. Now, those are the 7 steps, and I hope I've given you enough food for thought today. What I do also want to touch on quickly before we go is how to overcome some of those internal hurdles that we all have, those mental barriers that come up. And again, from speaking with the interviewees on the Phoenix phenomenon, even multiple international bestsellers have these doubts that crop up, and most of them are centered around, who am I? Who's going to buy my book? Why am I doing this? I'm not an expert. All of that internal thoughts that go on. And so I have asked people, what it is that's helped them to get through it. And 9 times out of 10, they've all said, it's not about me. It's about the readers. It's about the person's life I can change. It's about how I can get people to think about things differently. At the end of the day, it's about them. It's about the readers. So again, we're coming full circle here, but to get started on your journey and to be successful, you need to get clear on your why. And this will give you the passion that you need to share your message with the world. When you can own your message and really step up and embody it and scream it from the rooftops, you will elevate your connection to your readers. And when you nail all of these things, the words and the whole process will just flow. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. Now, if you do want to get in touch to talk about your potential book project or anything else that you'd like a clarification on, don't hesitate to get in touch with me at roxannewriter.com.au. Now, I do have a book me button if you'd like to get on the phone, and we can just talk through everything that's possible for you. And I always love to hear what people's passion projects are. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you also to the Sunshine Coast Women's Lifestyle Expo for giving me the opportunity today. Thank you.